Hello and welcome to episode 21 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by MetsmerizedOnline.com. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, along with my co-host and MMO executive editor, Mike Mayer. And Mike, the regular season has come and gone, and the 2022 New York Mets won 101 games. How you feeling going into this now wild card series, I guess? And we'll get into all that in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. The Mets just won the second most games in a single season in team history, and they're headed to a wild card series. Feels kind of wild. This feels like a perfect time for the tiebreaker game, but this is the first year that they got rid of it. Otherwise, we'd see the Mets and Braves with identical records playing tomorrow. And unfortunately, the Mets dropped the ball in Atlanta when they got swept, and now they have to go to the wild card even after 101 wins.
Yeah, it's really wild, right? The first year with overall probably the best Mets team I've ever seen, and we've talked about it throughout the season. And just, with the Mets being so good, but with this new playoff format, we've talked about it being a wild card team. It's a tough road to climb to get to that, to win the National League into a World Series, but great season all around. We're going to get to last weekend with the Braves. I think a lot of folks were pretty upset that they couldn't win one game. If they would have won one game, they would have won the NL East. You can point back to the beginning of September, going 1-7 at home to, the Cubs and the Nationals. They're playing bad ball, a rough stretch. But it's hard to get mad at a 101 win season when we're used to about 70 to 75 wins a year here the last decade. So it's kind of mixed emotions, but let's, I guess, get to the Atlanta series. Obviously they got swept, put the division out of hand. I just kind of want to get your reaction from everything you saw from that past weekend.
Yeah, to me, the biggest surprise was that you're going in with DeGrom, Scherzer, and Bassett, and you just think that you're going to get great starting pitching, and if you lose, something else is going to be the reason. Sure, the Mets should have scored more runs, but the fact that trio had a 6.91 ERA is the reason they lost the series. It really is. You expected those guys to be very good. None of them were particularly up to snub. DeGrom was the best of the three, and still 3 earned runs in 6 innings is not DeGrom-like. And he had to come out probably about an inning early because of the blister issue he had. So, yeah, for me, that's the most disappointing thing is clearly those guys didn't come up to what the Mets had hoped. If even one of those guys pitches like they're capable of, again, we're having a much different conversation potentially about what the Mets are doing on Friday. They'd like to be resting, especially with Starling Marte.
Right.
But yeah, beyond that, you saw what the Braves do offensively. They hit home runs. They had 7 in the series. The Mets only had 3. That's instant offense. In close games, you're only a dinger away from some offense, and that's what the Braves bring. That's what they brought last year. So this is a team that's going to continue doing that. They have a lot of power on that team, and that makes them tough in the postseason, where runs are even more at a scarcity to be able to put up 5, 6, 7 different guys in that lineup that you have to be afraid that are going to hit a solo home run at any time to put a run on the board. Beyond that, yeah, Lindor had a bad series. I think Buck had a little bit of a tough series.
Sure did.
There was moves here and there that you're basically like, well, it's not an obvious he's wrong, but it felt like every 50-50 decision essentially Buck went with, it didn't work out. Whether it was bringing McNeil into a close game, not pinch hitting in a couple of spots, not using his best relievers in when he's down just by a couple runs. And that's kind of been a thing, surprisingly, that Showalter, or unsurprisingly, I guess, if you want to ask Orioles fans, with Buck, is that sometimes he treats these games where they're only down by 1 or 2 runs like it's a time to get someone work, which is very bizarre and unusual. And hopefully that comes to an end now that the regular season is over. You'd like to see him go at it with his better guys as much as possible. And you have to in the playoffs. This is the end of the season. So you can't just waste anyone out in the bullpen. And I know that's in the back of some Mets fans' minds now that you've seen him make some unusual bullpen moves and his history, the big move with Zach or the non-move with Zach Britton. That's got to be in the back of your mind a little bit are we going to get in a situation where Buck makes this bullpen move again that could cost your team the series?
Yeah, no, it's been in the back of my mind, the side of my mind, the front of my mind all season. I feel like I've been saying that a lot, and that was my worries about when they hired him. Listen, 100+ wins. I don't think he'll win Manager of the Year because they didn't win the division. I feel like they won the division, it probably would have been his. It still might be, but I just don't. I feel like it'll probably be Dave Roberts now, which I guess he should be the Manager of the Year every year because the Dodgers are, the best team in baseball every year. But I to your point, it just felt like, so to me, the game to win was Friday. And I harped on it. We talked with Jacob Resnick last week. We had him on the show. Also, shout out Jacob. Got a nice little shout out there on the broadcast today. Love that. But, it felt like the playoffs for me started last Friday, right? That's when they started. To me, that Brave series, that's the start of the postseason for the Mets. And Friday's game especially. Now, DeGrom threw 3 bad pitches the whole game. Now, is that on DeGrom-like? Yes, we get that. His command is not, as sharp as we'd like. I understand all that. But the fact that, and you touched on it again with the bullpen moves, there's the A bullpen and the B bullpen. And when he has leads, he uses the A bullpen. And when he doesn't have leads, he uses that B, so to speak, B bullpen. And in the 2-run game in the 7th inning, in a game that's a must win, that felt like a game in May that, like you said, trying to get somebody work to see what you have. That's not the time for this. And you also can't worry about, I don't want to blow, Ottavino or blow, burn someone like that for the rest of the series. Every game is win right now. You had to win one game. Forget about winning the series, anything like that. You had to win one game. And it felt like for me, Buck had no urgency, especially in that first game. Now, the other two, Scherzer and Bassett did not pitch well. They really didn't keep him in the game. And also, if Dansby Swanson, if the Angels want to give you a huge contract like they like to do something, take it. Go to California. Please get the hell out of here. Done seeing you. Met killer now. But it's just, that first game to me, even with the way the ground pitched, that was the game to win. It was there. And like you said, not pinch hitting Vogelback for Alvarez in the 9th inning was ridiculous. I don't blame Alvarez one bit. I'm not, putting him down. He's a rookie in a big spot. He wanted to hit that ball to South Carolina. It is what it is. Jansen wasn't throwing strikes. Vogelback's a guy with the lefty-righty matchup and a guy that sees pitches. That's who I think everybody wanted. That's why you traded for the guy. And unfortunately, that was the only time Jansen really was shaky the whole series. The other 2 games, he was good. It is what it is. First time all year that they kind of, didn't rise to the occasion. I think like everyone's surprised about it. I thought for sure they'd win one game. But, they didn't. The Braves are a great team. I don't want to hear about collapses. Mets played 22 games over 500 up to that stretch. The Braves played like 800 baseball for 2 months. There's nothing you can do. 2 great teams, and now you just kind of got to, take your chances here in the wild card, hope things go well. As far as the Padres goes, you're facing Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, Blake Snell. That's no, Snell game 3 if need be, but that's a tough sled in there. This is a good team. Mets lost to them during the season series, which, I think we've seen in the past doesn't matter a ton, but it's something, I just kind of, wondering what you think where the Mets chances are kind of for them this weekend.
Yeah, I think so. You got Scherzer versus Darvish in game 1. Darvish has been really good against the Mets.
Really good.
They've struggled against him. So Scherzer's going to have to be on his game. He's going to have to pitch really well. Going to have to hope for, a walk and a bomb, something like that to get on the board against Darvish. I think, the Padres are a really good team. I think they're probably better than their record shows. They play in a division that's pretty tough. Talking about the Dodgers, that's a fair amount of losses right there whenever you have to play the Dodgers. So they have a pretty good lineup. They got, you just talked about Musgrove, Snell, and Darvish. They got a pretty good starting crew. And maybe you'll see the weak spot in the bullpen. They do have some good arms in the bullpen, and they traded for Hader, but Hader hasn't been the same guy. So maybe that's their biggest weak spot, I would guess. And their lineup hasn't hit the way they would have expected since the trades for Soto, Drury, and Bell, because actually all 3 of them haven't played to what they were before the trade. So, but those are all guys that can break out at any time. And when you already have Machado and some other guys like Jake Cronenworth and Hae-Sung Kim, they have a pretty deep lineup. So yeah, I think it's going to be a low scoring, tight series.
Yep.
And if it does come down to, say, the bullpen, I think the Mets have the edge there. Simply put, with Diaz.
Yep.
Diaz is a much better pitcher right now than Josh Hader.
Right.
And Ottavino is looking good going into the postseason. Seth Lugo's looking good right now. Jolie Rodriguez is pitching great right now. And you have to think, at some point in this series, we're going to see Jolie Rodriguez pitching a 2-1 Soto in a big spot. And
oh boy,
I know just the thought of it gives you shivers, but the fact that Jolie Rodriguez has been really good over the last month or so certainly makes you feel better than it did at the trade deadline when you were like, well, why didn't they get a lefty? And Jolie had an ERA over 5. He certainly pitched better, but I mean, that's like a thing I would be looking for. That could be not just a game changer when you're talking about a 3-game series. Any game-changing at bat turns into a series-changing at bat.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you're going to bring it up, so I might as well just jump into it. Multiple people have mentioned that if the Mets win Game 1 with Max Scherzer on the mound, that they could decide to not pitch Jacob deGrom and go with Chris Bassett in the second game.
Right.
With the hopes of, well, then you win with Bassett and you don't have to use deGrom, and deGrom can start the series against the Dodgers. I think we fully agree on this one that it is just a bad idea. I mean, I don't think you can ever take anything for granted in the playoffs. And to me, that just screams, if that's really their plan and not just what they're putting out there.
Right.
Just it doesn't sound like a good idea. I mean, Joel Sherman referenced that Buck Showalter did this before with the 1995 Yankees. Well, folks, Baseball Reference will tell you that the 1995 Yankees didn't win a single playoff series that year.
0.
Well, Zippo, they played against the Mariners in the first series and lost. So I'm not sure. I didn't read all the details about exactly what Buck did, but I mean, I think that would be, whether it's Buck, whoever is making that decision, I think it would be overthinking to the max. You win in Game 1 with Max Scherzer, you throw Jacob deGrom to win the series.
Right.
There's no reason to try to go to an extra game. And I'm not saying Chris Bassett isn't a good pitcher. He's a very good pitcher.
Right.
He's a ace 2 guy on a lot of teams, but he's not Jacob deGrom.
Right.
Jacob deGrom with a blister is still better than Chris Bassett. So you pitch Jacob deGrom and try to win the series, and then you go from there. I mean, obviously it stinks to have to go to the Dodgers series and not have deGrom or Scherzer pitch that first game, but it is what it is at this point. You can't try to force it to make sure that one of those guys pitches Game 1. And to me, that's what they're trying to do.
Right.
Or at least putting it out there that they're trying to do, is they're really trying to force that when it's just not the right move.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, to that point, you lost that luxury of trying to save deGrom by not winning the division. You are now in the wild card series, and you have to win 2 games to advance. So it's every game is all hands on deck. You have to live and die by your horses. That's why you signed Scherzer to that big deal to bring him in here. That's why you let deGrom rehab for so long and come back in August, because you are living and dying by your horses. I totally agree. Makes, especially if you win Game 1, you want to keep the momentum going. You don't want this to go to a 3rd game, and you can't look ahead. You have to win the series that's in front of you. That's postseason baseball in general, is 1 game at a time, 1 win at a time. You can't look ahead, because if you get caught doing that, you're going to lose. More likely than not, you're going to lose. So I am completely in agreement there. Another point, just as far as, I know you brought up Juan Soto. He's a guy, now you're going to say, oh, shocker. He's a guy that I think the Mets really have to worry about. And I say that because, like you mentioned, hasn't been great since the trade deadline, hasn't been doing great in a Padre uniform so far, but he loves to hit at Citi Field. Loves to hit there, and the numbers back that up. So you just don't want to worry. You don't want a guy coming in struggling, coming to a place where he's comfortable like Citi Field and get hot again. So the Mets really have to be careful with him. Like I said, I know he's struggling, but that's a ballpark that he loves, and it's all 3 games are there. They have to be extra careful. And another, point I wanted to just bring up in general was the loss of Marte from last weekend. think you see that, him not being in the top of that lineup there, really hurts the Mets. I think in general, the Mets offense goes, and I've said it before, as Marte and Alonso go. So having Marte not there, especially against lefties, has been tough. So I guess, with that, I'm wondering, it's one step at a time here, but how much of a run do you think the Mets can realistically make without Starling Marte? And it doesn't, at least for this weekend, doesn't seem like they're going to have them. And who knows, if they advance moving forward. So I'm just kind of curious your thoughts there.
So to kind of answer this, I will say we have predictions coming out later this week, how the Mets are going to do. And I do think that the Mets are still going to win the series. So obviously I think they can do that without Marte.
Yep.
That's where it gets dicier. For the Mets or any team to have a chance against the Dodgers, you really have to be at 100%, play really well for the entire series, and certainly have some lucky things go your way. I mean, that's how good this Dodgers team is. They're the best team in baseball by a pretty wide margin.
Right.
So I think you have to have Marte. Obviously, right now he did some outfield drills today, but didn't throw still because he still is uncomfortable gripping a ball and gripping a bat. Obviously, there's nothing you can do beyond that. He can just keep testing it.
Right.
I'm not sure that's what he's going to do. Obviously, they said it's a long shot for him to be for the wild card series, and that makes sense. He's not doing either of those things I said right now. So for him to just be able to do that in the next how many ever hours they need to before they put in the wild card roster, I'd be pretty surprised. Things change. I mean, getting out of that series and 5 days from now, I think there's a more likely outcome of him being on the roster. And we have the DH. So I think you could at least roll him in that way.
Right.
And that would still certainly help the Mets, like you said, against lefties. With the Dodgers have Kershaw, obviously. That would be a help. And like you said, he lengthens the lineup. It's a different Mets lineup. I know some of the guys that have filled in have been okay, but they still just haven't had the same production as Starlin Marte. So yeah, that's a huge X factor. Doesn't look like it's going to be a factor in the wild card series, but that'll be something definitely to watch and for the Mets to hope for if they beat the Padres.
Yeah, and kind of going along to that point is Marte with this injury, you got to give Francisco Lindor a ton of credit. The guy played his 161st game today. He missed one game from that broken finger. Obviously, I don't know how similar the injuries are. I know Lindor got his jammed in the door, and Marte was obviously hitting the hand in a pitch. But just the durability of him to be able to play every day and continue to produce. Obviously, in June. Or June or July when the injury happened, he had kind of a bad month. Obviously, he's playing through that broken finger. It actually would have cost him an MVP, if we're being honest. But I got to give Lindor, a lot of credit. Total 180 from last year. Gary Cohen mentioned it tonight. It's just how more comfortable he just seems in general with everything. The media, the city, playing here, the pressure, and you saw that this year. Defensively, he's one of the best in the game, and I think we all knew that no matter what, that's what you were getting at a minimum. But he really proved that it stretches. He got a lot of clutch hits late in games down the stretch there. Over 100 RBIs, almost 30 home runs. You can't really, ask for much more than that from your shortstop that you're paying a lot of money to. So I got to just give him a shout out there because I really am impressed, with the 180 he took from last year to this year.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we saw the future, but we talked on the podcast before the year started that Lindor really turned it around in the second half of last year. And there was that thing where we saw with Carlos Beltran. New York is a different place to play. And Beltran struggled in his first year and then went off and was great for the Mets in his career. That's what we're seeing with Lindor. He's more comfortable. He didn't get off to a bad start this year like he did last year. And he's just looked great. I mean, throughout the year, like you said, the only one bad thing that happened all year for him was that fractured finger that he told Buck he was going to play through. He did play through. Obviously, his offense took a hit. And like you said, that injury is going to cost him a little bit in the MVP vote because this is a guy that's going to finish coming into today. He was 6th in WAR in Major League Baseball. So he's going to be at 6, 7, 5, right around there, right next to Freddie Freeman, who's obviously going to be in the MVP talks too. So, I mean, this is a guy, him and Alonso are both going to get MVP votes. And yeah, it's great to see. And we'll see what he does in the playoffs. He's one of the only Mets players that does have a little bit of playoff experience too, from his days with the Guardians. So, yeah, hats off to him to be able to rebound like that, have a great season. And just the other day too, I'll have to mention it real quick. He surprised, well, not surprised, they had talked about it, but him and his wife Katya hosted Carmelo, a kid, 8-year-old, up in the Mets clubhouse.
Yep.
He took Carmelo to meet all the players and stuff. This story kind of started last year when his family posted video about Carmelo freaking out when the Mets traded for Lindor. And then Lindor actually surprised the kid by meeting him over Zoom last year. Carmelo thought he was talking to a teacher for upcoming school, and it ended up being Lindor. So, I mean, this is a guy that's done everything right this year, between off the field, on the field, everything. And we're talking in the first year of 10 years. So It's great to see that he is completely comfortable now, and he's just going to be the superstar that the Mets thought they got when they traded for him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He seems to immerse himself in the community and everything. He loves tennis. He's been at the U.S. Open. They have pictures of him with that and stuff. So it's, it's great to see that he's like, fully, gotten comfortable here. And like you said, doing stuff like that with the fans and everything. It's really nice. Just, seems like a lighthearted guy, but, he busts his butt on the field, takes it seriously. And, the results spoke for themselves this year. And same thing for Pete. We've talked about him all year. Besides the last few weeks, he's pressed a bit, but he's been clutch pretty much all year. Obviously, leading the league in RBIs and everything. Hopefully, all you can hope for at this point for this weekend, 3-game series, that guys like Alonso, McNeil, Nimmo that really haven't, had much posting experience, just press a little too much. That's probably my main concern with the offense, especially without Marte and the pitching staff that they're going to have to face. But, being at home, should be a huge advantage. So, hopefully everybody packs out Citi Field this weekend. But with that, you mentioned Freddie Freeman MVP votes. One thing Freddie Freeman is not going to get is a batting title. Made sure of that today. He had to go 4 for 4, I think, to beat McNeil, because McNeil didn't play today because he had the lead. Freeman went 3 for 4. So McNeil is now the major league batting champion for this year. Tremendous stuff. I know Lindor said at the beginning of the year that he'd buy McNeil a car if he won a batting title. So, I guess we'll see how that is. Wonder if we'll get, a certified pre-owned, and we'll get a new one. We'll have to find that out after the season. But hats off to Jeff. Again, another 180 from last year. I think last year was probably the best thing that could have happened to him, because he realized that, hitting the ball in the air, trying to hit 30 home runs isn't really going to get him paid. But line drive a day keeps the doctor away, and it got him a batting title, something I know he's wanted to do. So, just congratulations to him, and was also really the only person with a pulse in Atlanta that weekend, to be honest with you, with the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I posted about it on Twitter. McNeil at one point in late July was down to 287 and was, I think it was like 50 points below Freddie Freeman at the time. And over the last 233 at-bats, McNeil hit 378. I mean, wow. That's a just nuts amount of at-bats to hit 378. And yeah, the second half, he's been terrific. He's looked great. Just about every series, you're talking about a guy that gets 4 or 5 hits every series at least. And he's just been that consistent bat in the Mets lineup. It's such a great turnaround. We're talking about a guy who hit in the 250s last year. Mm-hmm. So for him to be able to do this, I mean, I think it gives Buck the option of basically putting McNeil wherever in the lineup, because we're also talking about a guy that's in the bottom 5 in the big leagues in strikeouts too. Yep. It's just a rare thing to have a guy like that in 2022 that's hitting for a lot of average, not showing much power, and not striking out at all. And he's not like your prototypical slap hitter. He does have a little bit of power, which he's showed the last couple of weeks with a couple of home runs. He's got 39 doubles. He's in the top 5 in the National League in doubles too. So he does have some power. And it's just, I think there's also a real chance that he's going to win a Gold Glove this year.
Just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
I mean, between how he's looked at second base and how he's been in the outfield, he could win the utility one. I mean, him and Guillermo will both be in the running for that. But I mean, this is a guy that could win a batting title and a Gold Glove coming off an off season where it wasn't sure if he was going to be on the team. And if he was on the team, was he going to bring you after a horrible year last year? So, I mean, it's huge for Jeff, and he's just one of those guys. That's the thing. I mean, I don't want to compare him to Murphy, but this is a guy that it's a similar type offense that Murphy had before he switched into the home run. And it's kind of weird because McNeil's kind of the reverse of that. That's how McNeil really got noticed and got to the big leagues, is because him and Pete were homering through the minor leagues.
Right.
So, it'll be interesting to see if McNeil kind of keeps that same approach in the playoffs. Because it's a completely different atmosphere, and it's a different type of offense. We've seen some guys just go on tears, home run tears in the postseason. And hopefully the Mets see that, whether it's McNeil, Lindor, Alonso, Vogelbach, someone like that. They're going to need some offense from somewhere. And I mean, McNeil's been that guy so far this year that's kind of been the most consistent. And I think one of the big questions going into the Padres series is the roster. What are the Mets going to do? They're not going to use Trevor Williams in the wild card series. He pitched 6 innings tonight, which was great because it saved the rest of their bullpen. But he's not going to be. He obviously won't pitch in that series, so he won't be on the roster. Tyler McGill went on the injured list today. They didn't say what it was, so it's the COVID injured list, so he's not going to be on the roster. So I think it's potential that they go short one pitcher than you normally would.
Right.
With the thoughts of carrying Francisco Alvarez.
Right.
And maybe then another either Darren Ruff or Mark Vientos. They mentioned today that Darren Ruff is healthy and he's eligible to come off the injured list on Friday. So,
oh boy.
Yeah. But that's the tough thing. I mean, Ruff, we know all about what Ruff has done for the Mets. He has 10 hits with the Mets. JD Davis has 8 home runs with the Giants. We won't delve more into that, but that shows you just how bad Darren Ruff has been. But Ruff has historically crushed lefties.
Right.
He's seen Hader and Schnell a little bit. He has success in those minimal at-bats. Those two are the big guys that are going to pitch for the Padres. He does offer you more versatility than Alvarez or Vientos because he can play first base and both corner outfield spots. But I think now there's a chance they carry one less pitcher than you might normally. With the thoughts of the 3 starters, you're going to get bulk innings.
Right.
Lugo, you can go 2 innings if you want. Diaz, they've shown that they're not afraid to go more than 3 outs with him.
Right.
Ottavino is a guy that can get more than 3 outs.
Right.
So I think they feel pretty comfortable with those type of pitchers that you don't need to carry a long guy.
Right.
So that allows you to have a bigger bench, and they kind of have to anyway because you're going to have Terrence Gore that is essentially just a pinch run only guy. And I think at this point you kind of have to carry Alvarez. I don't think there's any other option, but I think you also have to carry James McCann too, because if you get in a situation where it's 3 straight games in a row, I'm not sure if you want to catch Nito 3 straight games.
Right.
And if you don't, you just can't put Alvarez behind him.
No.
And I'm not downfalling his defense, which has improved this year, but when's the last time a 20-year-old caught in the playoffs? I mean, it just doesn't happen, and that's a lot to
absolutely
have, especially when outside of today and a couple of innings last night, he hasn't caught in the big leagues. He did catch DeGrom and Scherzer in the minors this year, but I mean, that's obviously much different than the playoffs. So I think you have to put Alvarez on the roster just for his bat. I mean, they need that pop. He can DH at least when they face Schnell. And so once you have a guy like Gore, who's pretty one-dimensional on the roster, and then Alvarez essentially is one-dimensional because you're carrying him as a bat, I think if it came down to Ruff or Vientos, you might lean Ruff simply because he has that versatility.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. I think Vientos will be the odd man out. I think they will carry Alvarez because, like you said, especially against lefties, they need some sort of pop there. And in general, pop and Alvarez has that. And they'll only put him in positions, I would assume, to succeed as far as offensively. He's not going to see the field at all as a catcher. I agree there. It's just not fair to put him in a position like that in the playoffs and expect him to be able to excel. That's not good for his long term growth and for the Mets right now for what they're trying to do. But his bat plays. I think in general, the Mets probably just don't want to get burned as far as they traded 4 guys for Darren Ruff. They're not, and he signed for next year. They're not going to want to look like totally foolish. So I would assume they'll put him on the roster. I would assume the only time you'll see him is either if a lefty reliever comes in one of those games, or if it gets to Sunday and they face Snell, he'll get a start because it's a lefty. But I agree with you. It's just keep thinking back to how much the loss of Marte kills everything. Because, with Marte at the top of the lineup, McNeil was batting 7th and 8th at times. He just lengthened everything out. But listen, that's baseball, right? The Mets have gotten hit like 3,000 times this year. So somebody was bound to get injured from it. It is what it is. Next man up. Hopefully you Darvish, remembers that he doesn't pitch too well in the postseason. I'm kind of hoping he remembers that. But, we'll see. It should be a fun series. But I guess, the last thing I guess I wanted to kind of talk about quickly was Gary Cohen, finalist for the Frick Award, honorable award for in 2023 for next year's Hall of Fame class. I think he's one of 10 broadcasters to be nominated. If it's up to me, he'd be in tomorrow. He's the best at it, the best living broadcaster in any sport. He's the man. Nobody does it better than him. So if he doesn't win, it's dumb. They should get rid of the award because he's the best. So he should be in there. But, shout out to him. Awesome season again. It's like the Mets are making the playoffs, right? But it's like everybody's sad today because it's the last time we get to hear Gary call a game till the end of February. And, we're going to be stuck with the ESPN crew, which nobody is too thrilled about. But that's just shows how good Gary is. And again, hopefully he wins that because to me, nobody more deserving right now.
Yeah, I think if I remember, I think this is the second time he's been a finalist. In 2017, he was. I don't remember who won that year. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty tough field. There's some guys like Steve Stone,
yeah,
Stiglione on there. I mean, you got a lot of guys that have been with their teams a long time, but I mean, and it's not really just home biased. I mean, they've done all the polling on this, and the Mets are consistently 1, 2, or 3 with the Giants and Padres when it comes to the broadcast team. And yeah, I mean, Gary, that's always the thing. I mean, we haven't had to worry about it a ton because the Mets haven't made the playoffs a ton, but that's the thing that always stinks. The only thing that stinks about making the playoffs is that we don't get Gary, Keith, and Ron anymore. We do get Ron, I'm sure, is going to be on TV.
Yeah, he's calling the Yankees series, the divisional series. I guess, he doesn't get to pick his game, so we can't hold it against him.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have Keith right now anyway. He's shoulder surgery, so he's on the IL. I think he mentioned today that he had never been on the IL when he played, but this is the 7th surgery he's had since his playing days. So he fought through the playing days, but afterwards is what got him. So, yeah, it's going to be a real bummer not to hear those guys. And obviously, I mean, if he doesn't win it this year, it's an award that Cohen's going to end up winning at some point. Yep. He's one of the best in baseball and has been for a long time. So hopefully he wins it this year and gets everything that he deserves.
Absolutely. And Mike, I'm not ready to start doing off-season shows yet. So the Mets just have to win this weekend. That's it. Best of luck to them. Everyone who's going to Citi Field this weekend, be loud, be crazy, make it electric, make it as hard as you can for the Padres to do anything. Be excited. Postseason baseball's back in Queens. We've been waiting a long time for it. This is a great team, and anything can happen in the postseason, even with the new format. You just got to get rolling. A couple of guys get hot, and anything could happen, and they certainly have the players to do it. So that'll wrap things up here. We'll catch you next week, hopefully with a recap of a winning wild card series and previewing a Dodgers series. But until then, let's go Mets.